Go find them. Go find my guns.
There's multiple guns.
I gotta sleep.
Atlanta's midnight silence was shattered in a cold intensive care unit at 3 a.m. when King Harris lay fighting for his life. Doctors circulated around his bed with urgent, hushed orders and delivered the chilling message they feared they might have to say: prepare for the worst. The son of famed rapper Ty and Tiny was barely clinging to life, his body tethered to machines and monitors that announced each fragile heartbeat. Inside the hospital, sources say, family members were told that the coming 24 hours could determine everything. Scenes of raw anguish unfolded in the corridors as Tiny collapsed, her screams echoing down the hall, and that moment, captured on a short video, spread across social media within minutes. Millions of viewers watched the footage and shared in the heartbreak as the clip went viral and hashtags pleading for prayers surged online. A leaked medical report began to circulate that painted a far darker picture than what a simple jail brawl would explain. Insiders claim King's injuries included deep, patterned bruises and cuts inconsistent with an ordinary scuffle, suggesting deliberate, repeated harm that some described as torture. Those details raised questions about who might have wanted to punish him and whether his injuries were intended to send a message. Then a grainy audio clip surfaced, allegedly featuring a prison guard whispering that an order had come from above and that they had merely cleared the way. The implications of that single line reverberated across the internet, prompting furious speculation about powerful actors and who might have issued such an order. Rumors spread that the assault inside custody might have been more than a spontaneous fight, and that someone had orchestrated it to silence King. As people searched for answers, reports of a leaked ICU surveillance clip added a new layer of fear. Anonymous footage purportedly showing masked figures entering King's hospital room and appearing to tamper with life support. If authentic, such footage suggested his life might have been endangered even after he was removed from custody and placed in medical care. The idea that attackers could move so freely from a jail cell to a hospital bed horrified the public and intensified demands for accountability. Outside the hospital, Ty stood broken and pleading, his voice cracking as he beseeched strangers and officials alike not to let them take his son. Footage of the rapper, hands trembling and face streaked with tears, circulated immediately and became another painful image replayed across platforms. Alongside sympathetic messages, a harsher chorus criticized Ty and invoked the complicated history of fame and consequence, deepening the public divide. Meanwhile, hospital staff worked frantically to stabilize King, with nurses reportedly staying in shifts at his bedside as doctors tried endless interventions. Those close to the case told reporters that medical personnel were on edge, fearing possible outside interference and whispering about missing security footage and unexplained interruptions. A confidential hospital note mentioned traces of an unidentified substance in King's bloodstream, a detail that sparked new theories about poisoning and whether anything had been introduced after he arrived for treatment. Allegations of tampering fed conspiracy theories and raised questions about how secure a high-profile patient's care truly was when the public viewed the story through a lens of suspicion. The family reportedly received urgent consultations and were asked to sign forms usually reserved for cases in which doctors consider the possibility of death. Those documents amplified the sense of impending loss and were cited by witnesses who described Tiny collapsing again when told the grave prognosis. The crisis rippled outward as fans, protesters, and onlookers gathered at the hospital doors, holding candles, signs, and chants, demanding protection and answers. Some of those demonstrations escalated into attempts to breach hospital access, forcing law enforcement to bolster security and transforming the facility into something resembling a fortress. At the same time, celebrity reactions poured in from across the music world, with posts, videos, and live streams offering prayers and, in some cases, pointed accusations about industry forces or systemic failures. The public conversation splintered quickly between those demanding urgent investigations and others dismissing the tragedy as karma tied to past controversies. The dichotomy fed an increasingly toxic online environment, where empathy and vitriol vied for prominence, as the family's private grief became global spectacle. Within the ward, clinicians reportedly warned that King was slipping into multi-organ failure, a phrase that conveyed the clinical severity of his condition in stark terms. Amid alarms and frantic efforts, an unverified claim circulated that the young man had been declared clinically dead for nearly 2 minutes before resuscitation efforts succeeded, a detail that only deepened the anguish and the barrage of speculation. Anger boiled over as Ty allegedly confronted hospital staff, accusing them of a cover-up and demanding to know why cameras went dark and why safeguards failed. Leaked clips of the confrontation spread online, further feeding the cycle of outrage and grief among supporters who saw the family's pain played out in public forums. Alleged whistleblowers and anonymous sources continued to release fragments of records and recordings, each new leak adding fuel to a narrative of deliberate harm and systemic complicity. Claims ranged from ventilators being briefly turned off and security footage disappearing to suggestions that traces of foreign toxins were detected in his blood, though none of these elements were officially confirmed at first. As dawn neared, the hospital remained a focal point for a city in turmoil, with crowds swelling and online communities amplifying every rumor and every plea for justice. Inside, the family clung to hope even as physicians spoke openly about dwindling chances, and the public wrestled with the line between seeking truth and speculating without verified facts. The situation, raw and unfolding in real time, left many asking whether this was a catastrophic sequence of failures or a coordinated campaign to silence a young man who had become entangled in far larger conflicts. Throughout, the central fact remained unbearably simple. King Harris was fighting for his life, and those closest to him were living through the most excruciating hours imaginable. Atlanta's night sky hung heavy as chaos deepened inside Grady Memorial Hospital. What had once been described as critical but stable had shifted to something far more dire. Doctors whispered about the possibility of organ failure. Nurses moved with frantic urgency, carrying emergency medications, and every piercing beep from the machines attached to King Harris's fragile body felt like a countdown. Around 5 in the morning, Ty and Tiny were reportedly pulled into a private room where physicians delivered a devastating warning. If improvement didn't come soon, they would need to discuss letting him go. Those words sent Tiny into another collapse, this time so violent that she required medical attention herself. Witnesses described her screams echoing through the entire intensive care unit, begging not to have her baby taken away. A hospital staff member secretly recorded the scene, and the clip spread online within hours, shattering millions who watched her pleas. The storm escalated further when a confidential hospital report leaked suggesting the presence of a mysterious substance in King's bloodstream. Analysts quickly noted that it was not typically associated with injuries from a jail assault, raising suspicions that something had been introduced after he was admitted. The whispers of deliberate poisoning set social media ablaze, with users questioning whether someone within the hospital itself might be working against the Harris family. Not long after, an anonymous account released a grainy piece of footage it claimed came from hospital security cameras. In the clip, 2 hooded figures appeared to enter King's ICU room just before 3 in the morning. One bent toward his bed, while the other stood guard at the door. The short video cut off abruptly, but its implications were horrifying. Hashtags calling to protect King surged across platforms, and questions about how such a high-profile patient could be left so vulnerable dominated every conversation. Meanwhile, the Harris family fractured under immense pressure. Relatives argued openly, some accusing Ty of bringing this curse onto the household because of his past lifestyle, while he fired back, insisting this was no karmic payback but deliberate murder. Paparazzi captured clips of the heated exchanges outside the hospital, and those moments spread as quickly as the leaks, feeding a growing firestorm of public debate. Hours later, another audio recording leaked online, this one allegedly tied to a senior figure in Georgia's prison system. In muffled tones, a voice warned that if the boy talked, everything would collapse, and he couldn't be allowed to leave his hospital bed alive. The unverified tape fanned the flames of speculation, convincing many that King wasn't being targeted simply because of who he was, but because of what he might reveal. Outside the facility, Ty spoke with reporters in tears, declaring that his son had become the victim of a system intent on silencing him. He insisted the tragedy was no accident but a hit. His words divided the internet even further. Supporters rallied behind him, posting prayers and demanding justice, while critics accused him of manufacturing sympathy. Within the ICU, the situation grew darker still. A whistleblower nurse risked her position to anonymously reveal that King's ventilator had been switched off for several seconds earlier in the night before alarms sounded. To make matters worse, security footage of that exact moment was missing from official hospital records. Whether coincidence or cover-up, the revelation drove fears of sabotage. As theories multiplied, the celebrity world began to weigh in. Cardi B released a tearful video insisting King didn't deserve this, regardless of his father's reputation. Snoop Dogg spoke cryptically in a live stream, warning that the industry was not what it seemed, and that children were being targeted. These statements only fueled suspicion that something much bigger was unfolding beyond the hospital walls. Security inside and outside the facility was then tripled after protesters attempted to storm the entrance, chanting demands to see King and to protect him. Police officers in riot gear stood guard, transforming the hospital into what resembled a fortress under siege. Within those walls, Ty and Tiny refused to leave their son's side. Witnesses described Ty pacing constantly, whispering prayers, refusing food and rest, while Tiny clutched King's hand so tightly that nurses had to ask her to step back. Doctors began using clinical terms like multi-organ failure and non-reversible damage, cold words that shattered the family further. One source claimed Ty erupted in rage, punching walls and screaming at physicians not to ask him to let go. His outbursts reportedly terrified other patients nearby, and security was forced to intervene to calm him down. Meanwhile, online forums lit up with even darker theories, including one claiming a major record label executive had orchestrated the entire ordeal to silence King before he could release a track naming powerful figures. Anonymous accounts continued releasing supposed leaks, some claiming access to insider hospital notes and others alleging the involvement of rival gangs or government operatives. With each passing hour, what was fact and what was fabrication became harder to distinguish. Fans worldwide argued fiercely, some convinced that the Harris family was cursed, others certain this was a mafia-style takedown designed to silence them forever. The atmosphere outside the hospital became even more combustible. Crowds chanted and clashed with police as anger mixed with grief, while candlelight vigils turned into confrontations broadcast live to millions. Inside the ICU, time was slipping away. Doctors emphasized that King's condition was deteriorating rapidly and warned that the next 6 hours could decide his fate. Reports circulated that he had to be resuscitated after his heart stopped for nearly 2 minutes, forcing doctors to use electric paddles in a desperate attempt to bring him back. That revelation left fans horrified, realizing just how close Ty and Tiny came to losing their son. The event intensified speculation that he was being deliberately kept on the brink of death. The Harris family's grief became part of the public spectacle as footage of Tiny collapsing to her knees with a rosary in hand spread across news networks. Dubbed one of the saddest moments of the year, Ty was filmed storming into the ICU hallway, smashing a chair, and accusing hospital administrators of murder rather than medicine. His fury echoed across social media, galvanizing supporters and drawing more critics. Even as the family fought to hold on, hacker groups leaked supposed medical files showing toxins in King's blood, claiming he wasn't being saved but finished. The leaks fueled new waves of violence outside, with protesters chanting about cover-ups and clashing with police. The hospital became the epicenter of heartbreak, hysteria, and conspiracy. Fans demanded justice while the family prayed for a miracle. Celebrities continued to weigh in, some cryptic, others direct, all fueling suspicion that something larger was at play. And through it all, King Harris lay in the ICU, his body failing as machines kept him alive. Doctors warned his family to prepare for the worst as the world watched, horrified, waiting for the next update that could bring either relief or devastation. Atlanta's silence gave way to chaos as the sun rose, but inside Grady Memorial Hospital, the nightmare only worsened. Doctors revealed that King Harris had slipped even further into critical condition. Reports suggested his lungs were failing, his kidneys shutting down, and whispers of irreversible damage began to circulate. Then came the phrase that no family ever wants to hear: prepare for the worst. That leaked update ripped across the internet like wildfire, and within hours, millions around the world clung to hashtags pleading for a miracle. Fans flooded timelines with photos, prayers, and messages of desperate hope. But soon after, a claim surfaced online that sent shock waves through the public. Anonymous insiders alleged that King had been declared clinically dead for nearly 2 minutes before doctors managed to revive him with electric paddles. The possibility that Ty and Tiny nearly lost their son in real time was too devastating for fans to process. At the same time, it deepened suspicion that this wasn't just the lingering result of a jailhouse assault, but an orchestrated effort to keep him balanced between life and death. Tension boiled over as Ty clashed openly with hospital staff. Witnesses described him storming the ICU hallway, shouting that this wasn't medicine but murder. His fury escalated until he smashed a chair against a wall, a moment that leaked online and fueled global outrage. Tiny, on the other hand, was captured on video collapsing outside the ICU doors, clutching a rosary and begging God to save her child. That clip was replayed across networks, with anchors calling it one of the most heartbreaking moments of the year. These scenes only deepened the emotional divide across social media. Supporters mourning with the family, critics mocking their pain, and conspiracy theorists pushing darker explanations for what was unfolding. By evening, a new explosion hit the internet when hacker groups claimed to have accessed hospital files. They posted alleged test results showing foreign toxins in King's bloodstream, writing alongside them that doctors weren't saving him but finishing him. The revelation sent protesters outside the hospital into a frenzy. What began as candlelight vigils quickly turned violent, with chants of cover-up echoing through the crowd. Police responded with tear gas as clashes broke out between demonstrators and officers guarding the entrance. Live streams captured every moment, pulling in millions of viewers and painting a picture of a city on the brink of riot. Celebrities joined the uproar, each statement adding fuel to the fire. 50 Cent accused unnamed industry figures of orchestrating the attack. Meek Mill tweeted that the next generation was being silenced before it could even begin. Kanye West posted cryptically that saying no to powerful people brings punishment to your bloodline. To fans, these voices confirmed their worst fears, that King Harris was caught in a web of industry politics, corruption, and betrayal far larger than anyone imagined. The public split into two brutal camps, one demanding arrests and claiming King was tortured and poisoned, the other insisting this was divine karma for Ty's controversial past. The arguments online grew vicious, but in the ICU there was no debate. Only grief, fear, and the relentless sound of machines keeping King alive. As night fell again, reports circulated that surveillance feeds from the hospital had been hacked. On Telegram, users shared a clip that appeared to show two masked figures lurking outside King's room, one carrying a small case. Conspiracy theorists speculated the case contained poison or tools to tamper with equipment, and while authenticity couldn't be confirmed, the fear it sparked spread instantly across the globe. Fans began to question whether King was safe at all within the hospital walls, or whether forces determined to silence him were closing in. Then came the most devastating moment yet. At nearly midnight, Ty walked outside the hospital to face the crowd gathered with candles and banners. His face was streaked with tears, his body trembling as he spoke into microphones. He admitted that doctors told him to prepare for the worst and broke down asking how a father is supposed to prepare for losing his child. His voice cracked as he begged the world to pray harder, insisting his son did not deserve this. The emotional plea went viral instantly, described by many as one of the rawest displays of pain ever seen from the rapper. Millions replayed the clip, crying along with him as the family's private agony was shared with the world. Even as Ty begged for prayers, rumors of sabotage refused to die. Why had cameras gone dark during the jail assault? Who gave the order for guards to stand down? Why did reports of toxins in his blood keep surfacing? And now, who was ensuring he never left the hospital alive? Each unanswered question only thickened the mystery, feeding suspicions that this was more than tragedy, that it was an assassination attempt cloaked in medical crisis. Inside the ICU, doctors again warned that the next 24 hours would decide everything. King's body continued to deteriorate, each hour bringing new complications. His parents remained at his side, shattered yet unwilling to give up, clinging to hope against overwhelming odds. Outside, Atlanta pulsed with grief and fury as chants of justice for King, mixed with clashes between protesters and police. Online, the debate grew harsher, with accusations, conspiracies, and prayers flooding every platform. By now, what began as a personal tragedy had transformed into something much larger, a public spectacle, a possible conspiracy, and a story gripping millions around the world. The Harris family was told once again to prepare for the unthinkable. As Atlanta held its breath and the world watched, the question remained terrifyingly simple. Would King Harris survive this nightmare, or would his story end inside that cold ICU room while the world looked on helplessly?